Welcome everyone to a very special edition of Open Source Friday with two very special guest hosts. My name's Abby. I run open source maintainer programs here at GitHub. And Helen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Helen. I'm the engineering manager for both accessibility engineering here at GitHub, as well as what we've been calling maintainer tiny wins. Outside of GitHub, I'm also one of the lead developers for the WordPress project, so a very long time open source maintainer. For me, primarily actually focused on UI, community leadership, organization, that sort of thing. I'm also really excited. We're going to be joined today by Mitchell Hashimoto, who you might know from HashiCorp and projects like Terraform, more recently with Ghosty and the Vouch project, which I'm sure will be a hot topic, or just honestly being terminally online with the rest of us. So Mitchell, thanks for joining us.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So yeah, Mitchell, I was actually interested to hear how you came up with the Vouch project, or how that came to be, because I know it started with some like AI policy, disclosure policies, and what led to this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think with all things AI right now, it's things have moved fast. Things have moved really fast. I mean, things like Claude Code didn't even exist a year ago. I think it's not even a year old. It was March or May. March was the beta, I think. And Ghosty's 3 years old, and I've been doing open source. Open source is like a job for 15 years, and then prior to that, just as a side thing for like 5 years, so 20 total, right? Like it's almost been 2 decades of open source, and within the past 18 months, it's just like really, like you could really feel the difference in the contributions, and it's not just contributions; it's just any sort of interaction with the project. It just feels different than any time in the past 2 decades. And the issue we were facing was just a mountain of plausible looking but low quality contributions, and trying to sift through that, because the issue I always bring up is that you could use AI or anything to generate anything, but the issue reporting, PR boundary, at least for our project and for a lot of projects still, is a human boundary. Like a human comes on the other side. And so there's sort of like social norms that aren't happening, that just because I think the screen like makes it easy to not realize these social norms are happening, where you're just like throwing stuff across the wall. Vouch is like the 3rd or 4th iteration of an attempt to bring this under control in some way. And I should just add like a quick disclaimer that like I use AI every day. I'm totally not an anti-AI person, but it's a tool that has to be used with care. And like I said, you have to respect social norms still, even if you're using AI when you're collaborating with other humans. And so that was like really we could get into anything, but that was like really the motivating factors that led to this.
Yeah, and I know Helen and myself, we were tapped to host this one because we spent a lot of time thinking about open source maintenance and this problem specifically. So very excited to dive into you with this. And I know you've been in my view, one of the most thoughtful voices in open source and AI today. So excited to talk. But one thing
I crash out once in a while. Like sometimes I just like lose my mind, but like I reel it back in and bring it back to reality. Yeah.
It's good. I think I've seen you said anti-idiot, not anti-AI.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know if I could say that on here, but yeah.
He's allowed here.
Right. The business speak would be like etiquette, right? And I think we're talking about that as social norms, and how do we build social norms, and what does that look like? Like I know, probably similar time, like I started in IRC days, right? Like I had Helen was my registered nick on Freenode and everything, even in those times where that was its own type of risk. And, we would have situations where, somebody keeps joining more and more channels to berate you about something, and you're like, listen, man, this is the equivalent of you following somebody around who's clearly trying to walk away from you, right? And what is it about being online where we're like, oh, I don't know what etiquette is anymore. I really liked Ashley's post on the GitHub blog recently about Eternal September, and if maybe that's a dated reference for people at this point, but that problem of like, how do you quickly scale human behavior and etiquette? And we're absolutely speeding how we think about that right now.
Yeah, and this kind of behavior is not new at all to open source. And people bring that up all the time. And I completely agree. It's just the frequency of it, and frequency and quantity of it is the thing that's new to open source. Like you mentioned that IRC, bad actor type person, like that happened once in a while before. And now that's happening for my projects like 2 or 3 times a day. And so like yesterday we had somebody who used AI to open a PR, and now we have bots that close the PR. And then the AI opened it again, and then we closed it again, all automated. And then for some reason it opened an issue, and then we closed that again, and then they went online and complained about it. But like, the whole thing was just like the auto close comments all say like, they're polite. They're like, please read the policy. And the policy says exactly what to do. And you could tell it was like an AI doing this because it just didn't read that. It was just like, oh, that didn't work. Let me try this. Let me try this. And it was like throwing darts at a wall at a thing that is, again, a human boundary point. So, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how Vouch works? So sorry, Helen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we kind of ended up with is, it's this fundamental idea of how do you gain trust? I think that what Vouch does is basically says we now start from a default not trusted state. And you have to be vouched by somebody who vouches, like who has permission to vouch is completely up to the project. For the Ghosty project, it's just our maintainer group, which is quite large. Our maintainer plus moderator group, which is around a group of totals around like 20 people. And so it's quite large. And again, the way you get vouched is also up to the project. And for us, you really just have to like introduce yourself like a normal human and talk about what you want to work on. And you don't need to prove that you're a good developer. You don't need to show code samples or resumes. Like, I don't care about any of that. I just want to make sure that you're willing to communicate with us like a human. And if you're willing to do that, you're vouched. And if then become a bad actor, we'll remove you from the list. But that's basically how it works. Is you get vouched, and once you're on the vouch list, then you're able to open issues and open PRs and do things like that. But prior to that, if you're not on the vouch list, a bot comes through. It's actually a GitHub action comes through and auto closes everything with, like I said, with a link to the policy and things like that.
What do you use? Oh, I'm sorry if you can hear that. I think somebody just walked in. This dog is unhappy about it. What do you use for sort of that social connection? Like, is it chat? I think there's been mentions of things like Discord, using issues, using discussions, but what do you all use primarily?
Yeah, all the above. We have a really active Discord with something like, I haven't looked recently, but within the past like 6 months, it was like 30,000 people. Formally in the like contribution policy, we have a discussion, a GitHub discussion category called vouch requests. And it has a template that makes it easy, guides you through it. And if you just post there, then I think we've vouched everyone except one person so far. But realistically, yeah, people have popped up all over the place, and we'll just vouch for them. Like I always say, getting a vouch is easy because it's not like you're not getting a ton of privileges. It's not a security risk or anything. It's literally like letting you in the door to open an issue or PR. You can't merge code. You can't vouch other people. Like, it's a low bar. So we're willing to just hand them out. And most people are good actors. But I think just the mere barrier of introduce yourself, and one of our policies is in that introduction, don't use AI, because we're trying to meet as people, then you'll get vouched.
And something Helen said the other day made me think of, so I used to be at Mozilla before this, and one interaction that we saw a lot was people from certain countries would always ask for permission to contribute versus making a pull request first, which I guess is what we're encouraging now. But when you say like people should show up and just introduce themselves like a human, I think that has a lot of like cultural bias there. And yeah, Helen, you were talking about etiquette. That's also enwrapped in culture. So how are you thinking about that? Like, people who maybe don't know how to introduce themselves as a human in like this context, how can we make this so it's easy for everyone or accessible for everyone?
Yeah, I think that's why we have that templated vouch request discussion forum. So if you just hit like new, I forgot topic in the vouch request, it just guides you through the questions and answers. It's sort of like more of like a form. It's a little bit less like organic, a little bit less. I mean, it's human in the sense that you're doing it yourself and an AI shouldn't be doing it, but it's a little less like human, and like that's not how you would meet someone on the street. But that's okay. Like that, we're just looking for like some minimal effort to show that you're going to be respectful to the project, and that's about it. Like the analogy I like to make is that like PRs right now and AI right now feels like you're like sitting at a cafe working, and like somebody you've never met out of nowhere brings you like and just like throws a drink in front of you. And it's like, you don't know what kind of drink I want. Who are you? Did you put something I don't want to, like, did you poison this thing? Like, what is this? It's like, if you were to try to buy a drink for somebody, you'd probably be like, hey, I saw you working over here. Could I buy you a drink? Like, like something like that. And it's like, that's just what we're trying to do in open source now. And what I like to say is before, like the contribution itself, the act of contributing itself had enough of a effort barrier that you could default trust. Like there was the act of knowing how to check out a project, to read enough of the code base to make your change happen. You probably ran it and learned that. Like across the spectrum from junior to senior, that was enough of a barrier that the default of just open a PR worked, because even if the quality was really bad, they had to try to make it like to that point. And so I could come at it in good faith because I think they're coming at it with good faith, which is just like, oh, this is bad, but you tried. So let's try to like work together to make it happen. And the problem now is that people don't have to try. Like they could open a really low quality, like is it plausible looking, the low quality PR in minutes, seconds, and you can't expect, like an average PR review takes at least half an hour for me. So you can't expect me to put forward 30 plus minutes, usually hours, to review your PR that you didn't care enough about, that you threw over in 3 minutes. Like I'm just going to close that. It's like effort for effort is what I always say.
I was thinking a bit about when I started in WordPress things and what that looked like, and where that is similar to a system like Vouch and where it isn't similar to it. And for us, again, in those times, the recommendation that people would make was lurk in IRC, like watch the scheduled meetings, watch how people interact with each other. And again, like understand what those social norms are of the project just by observing, right? Like don't insert yourself into everything immediately, just hang out, watch. That's the beauty of this, like, open chat. And we logged everything because, no offline buffering in IRC. But that kind of is similar. And so Vouch in a way ends up being similar, even though I know my initial reaction was like, oh my God, we're gonna like end up, creating a system of bias or whatever it is. But maybe that's kind of what it's always been in some ways. I know in WordPress, there was a lot of just, oh, I recognize this person's handle because they're in IRC all the time, or I met them at a WordCamp or another event. And so it's just, an unspoken, unwritten, similar system that we ended up with. And so in some ways, like, is this, I don't know, almost working in the open again, in a way that sometimes we lose. I've seen that change a lot over the last, 15 years for me. And so maybe this is like in its own way, like a nice way of working in the open again, even though like, I know I have my reservations around like, who will we end up defaulting to, who will we end up biased toward. I know like a bunch of people have cited this over the last few weeks, which is that old 2017 study about GitHub PR merge rates, and like, what gender bias ended up doing to that. And so thinking about that as well, but it's still people doing people things. So how much can we really control for that?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some critical feedback. I mean, it's negative feedback on the idea of vouch because it is literally a form of gatekeeping. But I put this in the README of vouch, which is that there's a couple angles to that, which is one, open source. I think this is SQLite says this like somewhere on their website, but open source is not open contribution. Like the philosophical and like legal freedoms and ideals that open source fights for, if you like care about that sort of thing, have nothing to do with contribution. It's like freedom to use it however you want, freedom to modify it, those sorts of things. And those are all completely preserved with any form of gatekeeping on the contribution side. And then the other side is that open source contributions have always had gatekeeping, like with or without vouch. Like in some sense, I say it's better because at least the gatekeeping is like explicit in a file now. Like it's not just like some like invisible human thing, but like you've always had to get approval by somebody to get your PR merged at a very basic level. And other projects, like if you look at really big projects like the Linux kernel or something, there's a very strict hierarchy of who can talk to who in what mailing lists and when in order to get a change. And then that's just like the mere showing up to play, then getting it merged is like a whole nother like game that you have to play. And so like, I think, open source has always been about this idea of trust, and open source, when it works, like, when it works right, when you try to get rid of these biases and things like that, is about just lifting up the people that simply do good work. Like that's what it's supposed to be about. Obviously that gets really muddy in the real world. And the problem again is that there's so much noise out there to find these people now that are doing good work, because there's such an ocean of low quality bad work happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was at, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we actually still split our development lifecycle in WordPress, at least for the core part of the project. So all issues are track tickets. They're not on GitHub, and you can open a GitHub PR. This will run, actions for CI and all of that. It simplifies a lot of things on our end, but you have to explicitly associate that PR with a track ticket, right? And so we do have that barrier to entry, because who even knows how to sign up for track at this point? Who knows how to navigate it? Who knows what all those fields are in track? And so we already have that barrier to entry, and yet we've never been able to keep up with intake in the first place, right? Which was a big reason we haven't migrated fully to GitHub, is because like, what happens if we make it even easier to submit these things? We cannot keep up with the volume as it is. Like, we don't feel like we're always the responsible maintainers that we need to be for such a large project. And I think about that a lot is, from my maintainer perspective, what would I actually need to see in order to move a project like WordPress fully to GitHub for that lifecycle? Like, what sort of filtering tools, what sort of intake controls would I need to see? And then, the GitHub, because I work here, part of me wants to understand like, what are some of the big things as well as the small things, right? And the small things I do get to kind of work on directly. What are some things that we can do to support that, iteratively in the meantime, right? And also kind of rebuild that trust with maintainers, because I think we do have this tendency, like, any other group of humans, to want to hold things until we think it's perfect, right? Even though we all know that the computers are silly and never perfect, but we still try to hold it for that state. And we've kind of harmed that trust really with our maintainer users in particular, because there's not that trust that like we'll ship something and then fix it or adjust it if it's not gone right? Like everything now feels like these giant monolithic ships, and we're trying to, turn that around. And I think we've seen progress there, but thinking a lot about that as well, right? Is it things like, incentivizing non-code contributions, right? Like, how do we? I think reviews are incredibly important. They're like, as you said, they're incredibly time consuming, and I value people who do them. But right now it's still, how do I know that this was a review of value, right? Like, we've done some small changes to help, but like, what's that big picture of this review is valuable, and I want to give them credit for that as well in the software project. And so like, how do we think about those things? So I'd love to know, Mitchell, if like there are things that you would love to see in GitHub that would support kind of both the defensive parts, but also like the offensive parts, right? Like what you actually want to support and see in your projects.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to break that down into like a concrete specific feature request, but I think that the big picture is right now, like in the current times, it's been a lot about like, how do we get AI contributions to play nice? Like, for example, GitHub does a great job of highlighting, making first class the idea of contribution guidelines, right? Like, it shows up in the sidebar. If you're a new contributor, when you hit new issue, it like pops down a little popover that says, did you read the contribution guidelines? Like, there's all these little like call to actions to like nudge people in the right direction. People still ignore those pre-AI, but they're, GitHub tries, right? But with AI, it's just like slinging PRs via the API. And it's, you can't force the AI to load the contribution guidelines into its context, but like, yeah, like, how do we solve that problem for an era of machines that are contributing, where there is a process and simply like sending a put or post or whatever to the pull request REST API is not the process. And like, yeah, how do you get there? I think that's one, that's just one very specific example, but the bigger picture is managing that. And then, on the extreme, there's people that don't want to do human review at all. Like on the extreme, there's the ship a bunch of AI review all via AI, merge it if test pass, like things like that. And like, obviously, like as a platform, I feel like GitHub shouldn't prevent that. Like that's totally fine. And I don't agree with it, but I also don't care what people do in their other projects. So, but I think there's like something a little bit more nuanced there, which is like, how do you bring some level of respectful AI review to help combat these pull requests? Ghosty doesn't currently have an AI review. We don't use Copilot or anything for that. My big hesitation to that is because I feel like, again, it's a human boundary. If a human comes and said, hey, I spent 8 hours doing all this work, and then a robot comes in 30 seconds and like sends 40 style comments and just slams their work. Like, I feel like it's rude. Like I want their human contact to be met with human contact at first touch. And I'm still like grappling with that myself. And so, but I see the value there. So yeah, it's a roundabout answer to just be like, I think more and more tools in order to push people in the right direction, the right funnels, in order to encourage the type of interactions that a project wants.
Yeah, and what you say, human-to-human interaction. Yesterday, I met with the Matplotlib maintainers. They had an AI agent wrote a takedown piece on one of the maintainers after, I don't know if you both saw this, after they rejected its contribution. And yeah, they were basically asking, they didn't name vouch, and maybe we did mention vouch, but they were basically asking for something very similar. They wanted to be able to like whitelist contributors and accept people in. But they also wanted to like auto accept any maintainers in the scientific Python community. Where's that balance you see between like, should maintainers be spending all this time gatekeeping versus like auto accepting based on interactions? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that starts leading into like the idea of like web of trust, which I've talked about with Vouch. Vouch doesn't do much for it yet, but it is this idea that if you trust like the maintainers of other projects, then you might just trust who they vouched for. Again, whether it's Vouch or like, I'm just talking about generally, whatever tooling you're using. And so you build some system in order to lower your burden of vouching people, because there's this group of like known good actors. There's super blurry, gray, slippery slope there of like social credit scores and all sorts of like stuff happening there. I don't know the answer to any of that. I'm not doing any web of trust stuff exactly. Vouch could potentially be used as a tool to do it, but it's not a new thing. Like I am old enough to have gone to multiple like PGP like key parties, and meet people in person and exchange keys, and it works in the right context. And luckily for this, I don't think you need to do like in-person parties, but I think that you just need to see like if people behaved well. And one thing that I think people have asked for is sort of like, you don't want like a credit score per se, but I think GitHub has all the data in order to kind of share if like a person like is acting in a like effortful way. Like it's sort of like, how many PRs have you made in the past 24 hours? Because like bad AI drivers tend to just like throw a ton of stuff out there, and not necessarily like assigning their own subjective view on it, but just like giving that data so the project could determine like, we're not interested in people that ship code that fast, honestly, because we want to see more thinking happening. I don't know. I'm making stuff like that up, but yeah, those were my thoughts on that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think I was also curious about, when I mentioned earlier that the vouch, your specific style, puts things in the open again, right? And I think I like that, actually, like thinking about it. But like, how many of these signals, like instinctively, like not committing to any one particular thing, but how much would you want to see in the open versus sort of like a maintainer only type of view, which is something I'm also, thinking about, is like, what are maintainer views of things versus a contributor?
Yeah. like GitHub recently launched, I think they launched it, but they've talked about it publicly for sure, like that feature where you could like close PRs now, I think, to like maintainers only or something like that. And that's like great. Glad you shipped it. Like for me, it's too far because the permissions and like capabilities a maintainer gets is way too much for what I want a pull request person to get. So I don't want to close it to all maintainers and then have 100 maintainers that could just open PRs. I really just want to close it to like a group of people. And then that starts getting into like, you know, GitHub charges by org member. Like if you're an org, it charges by, you know, per seat. And so you can't like, if you have a private repo, I can't just add 500 people that I'm only adding them just so they could open a PR to a public repo, right? Like it's like all this, there's some like, it gets into like pricing and packaging challenges for GitHub Incorporated there. But that's basically what I want, right? It's just better like circle of trust controls so that I could build the policy that's right for my project.
Right. Yep. That makes sense. So I think like what I hear from that is more like, it's more like a private signal to you rather than something that like a user would look to game. That's something we're also thinking about, right? Like looking at a system like HackerOne, like where you know your score, right? In that context, and you work on it. And is that what we would want to see on GitHub? I don't know.
Well, I had a private email conversation with someone who had like some thoughts about that, and my pushback on needing web of trust and my pushback on like needing social scores and all that stuff is that even if you look at the largest projects on GitHub, like the unreasonably large projects like Homebrew or Nix packages or something, like the number of actual contributors, and these are people that have pushed like even a single commit, the number of actual contributors they have is, I think Homebrew had around like 15,000. I think Nix packages has around like 40 or 50,000. But if you consider that in the size of a social network, it's tiny, like tiny. And you're talking about like the largest ever projects that are accepting contributions for in a very strange way, right? Like updating a line in a copyright line in a single package. If you look at like realistic projects, like the projects I used to work on at HashiCorp and things like that, you're really looking at hundreds of active contributors across the lifetime of the project. And so manually vouching or manually like curating a list of hundreds of people within a social network that's private to you is not a lot of work. It's not a lot of overhead. And again, it's not a lot of privilege. It's the privilege to even participate. It's not the privilege to actually push releases or anything. So that's where my question of whether you ever need web of trust or anything is, because it's not that much overhead or burden to just do this thing. And bad actors can't really poison the well either, because, you know, you get to control who gets the vouch, and it's such a small community overall that you just unvouch them and it's just not a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Have you experienced contributors who feel, I guess, like entitled to having things merged because they spent the time on it?
Yeah. I mean, I have strong opinions about that. Clearly, I mean, what I've said is I think that there should be way more forks of projects out there. Is what I always say. I think like somehow, I'm sure I played like some part to mess this up too, some small part, but somehow people view like open source projects as like needing to be this centralized source of truth. Like it's a product, right? And like open source projects are projects, and you don't need it to be upstream. Like if you have a feature and you made a PR, I as a maintainer am not entitled to merge it. You as a contributor are not entitled to share it with me. Like it's a totally fair trade happening here. But you get that fundamental open source freedom where like, even if I say no, you could just fork the project and have your feature. And like, it's, you know, you get what you want. And what the lack of empathy I see on the contribution side is usually that what you're saying when you do a PR, you're not just shipping a feature, you're handing off who is maintaining that indefinitely. You know, the challenge isn't something I used to say at HashiCorp a decade ago, and this comes up like once a month, is I always say pushing the merge button is the easiest step in the whole process. Not to belittle the work that contributors do or anything, but programming isn't that hard. Programming is even less hard with AI. Getting to the point of having something and hitting the green button is really, really easy. The problem is the years after that, where now you have to consider not just the bugs in that thing and fixing them, but how that thing interacts with future features that you want to do, backwards compatibility, new platforms that you might need to now port that feature to that you wouldn't have had to do. Like years and years that you're signing up for. It's hard to remove features. So hitting the green button's easy. The life after it's hard. And so having some thought around that is important. And Ghosty gets features all the time that are great features. And I have this kind of admittedly snarky response, but I say, thanks. Like, I'm glad you can enjoy this in your fork, but I'm not accepting it. And I close it. And, like that's the idea.
Yeah. What's that? The open source contribution. Oh, I'm sorry. It's like not. We keep talking on top of it. We're new to being hosts for Open Source Friday. I don't know if you can tell this, but what's that saying? It's like, it's not free as in beer, it's free as in a puppy. Where someone's giving you, I forget who said that. Some like open source person. But it's a lot of work to keep up that open source contribution. But what I was going to say a bit earlier, I do spend a lot of time thinking about open source as a movement or as like a social movement. And I do think with any other movements, like gatekeeping is necessary at a certain point. Like it's open for anyone to sort of step in and like get involved, but then they gatekeep like who they're mentoring to become leaders in this space or like community leaders. And I think, we definitely need to be gatekeeping who we're putting the effort into mentorship to, because you can't mentor everyone. And that's how you grow the movement exponentially, is by being strategic about who you mentor, so that they go on to like mentor others. What I've seen is that this works best when there's some sort of criteria. So I talked about this at FOSDEM, so that's why it's like formed in my head right now. But before, we saw that criteria pretty easily with the pull request. People were committed. They understood what was going on. They like spent time doing this. But now it's, we've already talked about how that's gone. That signal's gone. But what are other ways that we can find? And it's similar to what you were talking about earlier, Mitchell, like people who will be respectful, people who will pay attention to the rules and the norms, who actually understand what they're committing, and then like spend the time to keep coming back. And that's what I've, spent a lot of time thinking. I'm not really sure what my question is around here, but like, how can what is the right signal that we should be looking for in open source? And can we embed that in the platform somehow, or enable maintainers to like find that signal somehow?
For us, I don't know how you would ever integrate this into the platform, but for us, like I think the two things that I notice is they're tightly related, is like an interest in collaborating. Like it's not just I did this thing, please merge, and they disappear. Like a back and forth that's actually productive with somebody is one signal that's really positive usually. And then the second is much harder to quantify, much more qualitative, but it's really, in this age of AI, it's really the evidence of thinking involved in it. And the most recent, just top of mind example I could give is in Ghosty, we merged something, I don't know, within the past 7 days, which was someone came along and provided a way to automatically generate a color palette from a smaller set of colors. So you could create a theme, a full 256 color theme based on only 16 colors that, mathematically like makes them look okay. And this person in their PR clearly used AI. Like the code quality of the PR was actually quite bad. I had to go in and almost rewrite everything. But like I was willing to do that, and I'm not even mad at the AI usage about that, because the thought that they put into how this thing works as a system made sense, and it was clearly there. So it's like, I'll clean up the code, because the code's the easy part, the thinking is the hard part, and AI is showing this to us every day. And then it had bugs. Like we shipped it in our nightly. People came up and complained that now their color themes are ugly, and he was present in those discussions. He didn't just disappear, say, sweet, my PR got merged, I'm out. He was present in those bug discussions of trying to understand, trying to explain his point of view. I challenged that point of view. He didn't get mad at me for challenging it. He challenged it back. Like we had this, it's a public GitHub discussion. We had this 20, 30 long post thread that went back and forth, found a middle ground of agreement, shipped future fixes. He did the PR for the future fixes. Like that. And again, the PR was messy. I cleaned it up, but like that thought, the thinking that happened behind this feature is what is very like, again, I don't know how you quantify it, but you could really feel it missing from a lot of the AI and low quality PRs that are happening. AI is so goal oriented and it does a great job of getting from point A to point B, but it achieves achieves the goal at the expense of anything else, because unless you tell it not to, because that's the goal. And it's really clear to see, like, people just post stuff where I'm like, oh, I fixed this bug, and in the process of fixing a bug, they broke 3 other things along the way because they weren't tested before, which sure is like partially our fault. They weren't specified, but like a human definitely wouldn't have done that because they would have realized like, oh, this is kind of like, whoops. So that proof of thought and thoughtfulness is the hard thing missing right now.
I mean, the thing I had started to say, and conveniently it remains relevant. You're fine. It's the way the internet works. Is what's like an immediate thing that I'm thinking about is what's a world where we, in PR templates or whatever it is, but we explicitly ask you like, what sort of time are you committing to this, right? Like, how are you thinking about your follow through commitment to this PR, right? So is like some questions around time. How do you want to engage if like bugs come up because of this, or follow on items or future enhancements, right? And we want to, include you in that conversation around like how we integrate with it, or how we do forward compatibility or backward compatibility. And is there something that we can ask without it becoming, like template overload, or that thing? I think you're the one who posted it, right? So just copy pasting everything, tabbing through a form, just pasting the same garbage.
Oh yeah.
In each input, right? Yeah. But how do we avoid that? But still, even if they do that, I mean, maybe that is the input, the signal that we need, right? Like, this is trash. And that's okay. And now I can quickly evaluate and move on from that. And would I get a stronger signal if somebody said, I've got, maybe an hour a week that I can follow through on this. I carve out an hour every Friday, and I'm willing to join chats or, see through my bug fixes during that time.
Yeah, and that's such a hard thing to, make systematic, because for sure, like the best example we have is we signed up this maintainer of like basically the Unicode spec within Ghosty. And he came kind of out of nowhere to me. And the best part about open source is these highly skilled people just appear out of nowhere. But he proposed like a really scary, deep cutting change in Ghosty that I wasn't super comfortable doing. But I noticed he was active and he was on Discord, and I reached out to him and was like, are you willing to like fix any bugs this introduces? And if it goes poorly, like, do you respect that we might just revert the whole thing? And he was super cool about it. And so basically I was like, okay, like, I don't fully understand this PR. The code looks fine. I'm just going to merge it because you're going to fix anything that follows this. And the point is, I think people get really stressed about creating the perfect PRs. And I do think some maintainers, the bar for PR quality is too high. I'm very much willing to just like let lower quality stuff through, as long as you commit, not legally, just like verbally commit to remaining present for a period of time to continue to refine and fix this. Like, that's the most important thing. You don't need to be a maintainer for years, but like, just for this thing to stabilize and really prove value in the project, then I'll merge it. And we have a nightly release, and I will push buggy, unpolished things all the time into the night release, because as long as I'm confident that we're going to course correct quickly after that. Like, I'd rather fix fast than spend months shipping something perfect that wasn't right to begin with. So
yeah, I've been advocating for people to scale up their mentorship with how much contributors are showing up. So if in their first pull request they're like actively going back and forth, then you can start making your review a bit of a teachable moment, accepting things more. They start making more pull requests. You can like maybe start pairing with them, or like invite them to an event, and you just scale up as people keep showing up. But I think, I agree.
That's Sorry. I mean, I haven't published it yet, but I have this draft blog post, and I'm still trying to it's messy right now. I'm still trying to bring it together, but I think you get the idea with the title of it. The working title of the draft right now is basically that AI is destroying my humanity. And it really stemmed around what you just said, which is that I individually as a person, I actually really like mentoring junior engineers, getting them their first PR. I know how big that could be just from their own personal self-esteem, but also nowadays for employment and stuff. I know how big that could be. And previously, since that effort barrier that we talked about existed, when something low quality came in, I would kind of be excited in the sense that like, okay, I'm going to help you get this over the line. And we're going to this will be a teachable moment. Now I just I'm so frustrated that we get these things and I just close them and I assume they're AI and just close them. And about 2 or 3 times in the whole history of the Ghostly project, I've done that and someone has responded, oh, this wasn't AI. I'm new and young and I'm, one person was a teenager and I didn't know how to do this. And it's kind of like a foot in your mouth because then I feel so bad because I'm perfectly capable of helping this person and I'd like to help this person, but the noise caused me to make this decision. Luckily, the two out of those 3 people came around and I was able to help them get their thing. And one person, and I still feel bad, one person had such a bad experience that they were just like, I can't be part of this project and I'm very sorry, whatever, and left and they're gone. And it could have all been avoided. And the whole thing is this is what this noise is causing. This is the real collateral human effect of what's going on here.
Yeah. I hope we learned from it quickly in the same way we're speedrunning all the mistakes. We'll find out. That's definitely something I want to find again as well. I know I worked on WordPress full time for 8 years, something like that, and stopped doing it. And there were many factors, right? There's some of it was around having kids and what it meant to be in the public eye and being pretty private about them, and that sort of thing. But also just I kind of lost that joy around mentoring people. I found myself feeling almost resentful about some of the things that we were having to repeat and am I really excited about bringing people up still, or am I too mired in the garbage that's going on around us, right? The harassment or the people being ultra negative about every single thing, or the people campaigning for commit access, right? Or for write access, which happens, not infrequently, those sorts of things. And am I tired of that? But I want to think about too, again, not just the defense mechanisms, but how can we bring, I don't know if it's the joy of being a maintainer back, but how can we kind of support, again, there's activities you actually want to be doing.
No, that's a good way to put it. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of open source maintainers and it is, I think the joy of being a maintainer, I mean, it's a good way to put it because I think that there is a sense that there's an overwhelming sense compared to any other time in the past 20 years that I've been doing this, that this is just a crappy job, basically. That's how I would describe it. There's this overwhelming sense of we're the shit slingers and this sucks and that sort of thing. And it definitely wasn't always that way. And I'm not just friends with a bunch of disillusioned, old open source people. There's some newer people out there that I mean, I feel you used to really want to be a maintainer and it was exciting and fun and you got to meet all these people and that still happens. But there's so much else baggage that comes with it. And I still have a lot of fun doing it, but my defense mechanism, I've sort of within the past 5 years, shifted my mindset to more of a fast, close, I'm just going to protect myself sort of mentality of doing things. Before I was a people pleaser, and now I'm more or less I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to close it. And dealing with the consequences there, but it keeps my work happier. But how do we bring that back in mass? And that's a really tough but good question.
Yeah. I mean, I remember people used to say you've got the dream job, right? When I would talk about being sponsored to work on WordPress full time. I'm not sure people would still say that now.
I mean, the grass is always greener, pros and cons. There's still some, it's still awesome being a maintainer, but there's, I think I would say the lows got lower and the highs didn't get much higher is how I would categorize it. Yeah.
I think that's correct. Yeah. The lows definitely got a lot lower really quickly. Even pre-AI, it was
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of it was etiquette, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, so Vouch has been out for a little bit. Like, has that brought back any of the joy?
Yeah, it's been, I mean, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks. It's not been that long,
Yeah.
but we integrated into Ghosty this past week in earnest, and there's been some like growing pains in the sense of bugs, and we have a release coming up, and we did a string free kind of like a string free, so we could do all the translations into all the different languages, and we realized that we like our team of like 50 various localization volunteers weren't vouched, and we didn't have a mechanism to do that quickly, and our like localization managers were like, who are already busy, were like, now I have to vouch all these people one by one, and it was really annoying. We fixed that, but overall the quality of what's been coming in has been so much better. People have been good behaved about the vouch system. I get a ton of joy of watching an email notification of an awful PR come in, and then 5 seconds later getting the email notification that a bot shut it down. I'm like, oh yes, good, they're gone now. Yeah, so I don't know about the joy in general, but like it's helping for now. It's still working.
It's good. Yeah, because I do think joy is needed to make open source sustainable and help open source thrive longer term.
Well, there's no other reason to do it because it's not a business model, right? Like you have to be in it for the fact that you love the technology or love the community, or like it's a pretty purely non-financially motivated job.
It is.
Yeah, you can get like some like, I mean, people are so like into like social stuff now. Like you can definitely get some like notoriety and stuff like that, which some people strive for and aim for, which could be fun. But or it just helps you get a job or something. But yeah, it's you have to be in it for the right reasons.
Yeah. So I do want to make sure we get to a few of the audience questions. I think our lovely producer Andrea, usual host of this show, has been sharing a few of them. Helen, I'll read this one. And then, okay. So here's a question that came in. Do you see Vouch implementing with SBOM or integrating with other tooling? I'm assuming that's like bringing in the maintainers of those to be vouched, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's a couple of directions I guess I could go because it's a little vague. So I apologize to whoever asked that. I mean, I think there's like the supply chain question of if it's like a supply chain security thing, or I can't tell if it's like producing supply chain security or consuming like a known like supply chain receipt in order to auto vouch people. I'm not sure which direction you're thinking there, but I'm pretty careful to say vouch is not a helpful or hurtful security tool. It's pretty orthogonal to security. Like it very much would not have prevented, for example, the I forgot the person's pseudonym, but the Jia Chan or Ching, the XZ backdoor stuff, because that person was, by all accounts, that person was an excellent maintainer for like 2 years and was like a sleeper agent that activated at some point. And yeah, for sure, like that person, they would have been vouched for sure. And so that wouldn't have prevented that. And vouch is not about that. So I would say, like, as I've said multiple times this session already, like vouch should not give you any more privileges than the ability to participate. It should not give you the ability to merge code. That's up to you because vouch doesn't care as a system. It's a framework for policy, not a policy itself. But I would recommend it, knowing that it's not a security tool on its own.
I mean, I feel like we kind of, again, we get back into, how maintainers relate to each other and how we can come into sharing, how we look at social signals, right? Like we talk a lot about like sharing processes and sharing tools and those kinds of things. And like, this is in itself, a process. But like, how do we as maintainers also think about, what we're evaluating, what those signals we're looking for, whether they're, formalized in a platform or not, but like, how are we evaluating those things? Absolutely, like, how committed you are to follow up has always been one of my favorite things. Like we had this was years ago at this point, but a great maintainer kind of yeeted in like a full rewrite of how classes were structured across WordPress. And we've got a lot of old PHP going on in there, so them being classes was like generous naming at best for a lot of it. And, you know, it wasn't necessarily that itself was a problem, right? I don't know that we were a huge fan of just kind of deciding one day that you wanted things to be your style. But it was much more that their activity had dropped off over the last several months. And it was like, are you really going to follow up on all the things you're going to break, especially as an extensible platform? Definitely something's going to break. And you're going to be available to follow up. Are you really going to be there for follow through? And the determination was no, they're not. I think I personally made that decision and said, kick it out. I hope you do it in the next 24 hours or I'm going to do it. Right. And yeah, we absolutely take those kinds of decisions. But, you know, I think we see somewhat less of people, you know, even observing those decisions happening. Like I did all of this. I think we had migrated to Slack at this point, right? But anybody can join. And so I did all of this, right, in our open-ish chat for people to see, to have that trail, all of that. But I feel like, you know, also people are not observing those spaces nearly as much as they were before in social segments.
Yeah. One thing you said, Mitchell, is how Vouch is a framework and not a policy in itself. Do you think, yeah, it sounds like you don't think there's a one size fits all policy for every open source project. So yeah, how should GitHub approach this so that it can enable maintainers to implement policies? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think there is a one size fits all. And I when I first announced Vouch, like one thing I said is like, I'm not the world police. Like I'm not here to tell you what's right or what's wrong for your project. Like you come up with that on your own. And like, I think for GitHub, like it's just about providing it's the same thing. I view all the features that GitHub produces as basically a framework, right? Like it encourages you into certain directions, but you're free to, for the most part, ignore those directions if you want. And so I think it's about exposing those and then having like a few sets of example paths that you could take. So I just recently in the Vouch project put together like a cookbook.md file in the repo root. It's pretty minimal right now, but my plan basically is to outline like, here are some templates for how you might run a project. Like here's how Ghosty runs our project. And we're a little bit different because we vouch through discussions. Like we don't allow unvouched people to even create issues. There's the open code project that vouches through issues. So you could always create an issue, but you can't create pull requests. Like that's totally up to you. I mean, I think that people could choose how, you know, it's sort of like you gatekeep how you want, but at least, and gatekeeping isn't new, and I'm not inventing gatekeeping, but it's like, you know, the rightness or the wrongness of the gatekeeping is up to your policy. It's like fundamentally not a bad idea. Yeah.
We have another audience question I think is somewhat related, and I'm going to not opine on this even though I'm thinking about it. But the audience question is, do you think trust models will eventually become as fundamental as version control in software development?
Yeah, I think they already have been. They've just been hiding. They've just been implicit, and that's why, you know, for the negative people that have sort of disliked Vouch for the negative aspects of gatekeeping or trust or lowering trust or anything like that, I think, you know, my answer has been at least it's explicit, at least it's public, like you see it, it's not hiding anything. Because I've been involved in open source a long time. Every project I've interacted with has had some form of gatekeeping. It's had some form of trust. It's had some sort of like, you know, inside baseball clubs that if you're not part of, it's harder for you. There's all sorts of exclusionary behavior in open source, and not to get overly like philosophical, but in everything, right? And so I think that my goal with something like Vouch is just to make it very explicit on what it is and keep the bar low. So like I said, for my projects, it's just introduce yourself like a person and you're vouched. So I'm not trying to alienate junior programmers, people new to open source. I'm not judging you for have never done a contribution before. I don't care about any of that. But It's really up to how you implement this thing. But I think trust has always been critical, whether it's open source or not. If you're an employee, most companies you don't join and are able to do anything and see anything, right? There's usually some level of like access control involved in corporate environments. It's the same in open source. So yeah, trust is everywhere.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I'm glad that you're working on a cookbook and making these policies more reusable, I think, because that came up in the Matplotlib call yesterday too. Just like we have standard licenses, we have standard codes of conduct, even contributing guidelines, there's templates at least. But everyone's figuring it out on their own for AI policies and how to handle all this. So I'm excited to see us start to standardize a bit and hopefully make it easier for projects to adopt all this.
Yeah, like I don't, it's sort of like, in a perfect world, I would not be here on this show talking about this subject, right? Like I'm not interested, and I did not seek out to have to build systems to manage trust for my open source projects. Like I want to work on the open source projects, not the systems of trust for those open source projects. And so like I complained about it enough, and people complained to me about it enough that I was just being annoying and complaining, that I went and tried to do something about it in my point of view. But yeah, I would have vastly preferred to found like a one click, like this has worked for other projects and here's the system, and I'd be like, great, like let me just do that, I guess. And that's what I'm trying to now help give other people. And I hope that, like, I really hope that whether it's through GitHub, I don't think GitHub could do this alone, but through systems that GitHub builds and through changes in AI and like changes to models and all sorts of stuff going forward, like I hope that systems like Vouch become irrelevant. Like I hope we don't have to keep doing this. I hope we could fix like fundamentals where like we don't need something like this. But I think at least for the next few years, this is probably the way things are going to have to be.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
you just
thanks
tied
for
together.
experimenting. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just neatly tied together a bunch of, the spirit of open source, right? It's like scratch your own itch, but it doesn't have to live forever. You can fork it, you can archive it, right? Like those PR settings that you mentioned way earlier, right? Like I was a part of shipping those. I did not do it to scratch my own itch, even though it was like my biggest beef with GitHub was that you could turn off issues, but not pull requests. I don't love that. It wasn't for me, but it is absolutely about, understanding like what should we be doing with open source? What are we saying when we have this in the tool, right? Like, did we as GitHub in a lot of ways say, if you put anything out in the public, now you have to be a maintainer, right? Because that was always on. And was that the right move, right? And has that in itself, been a part of what this environment has become, right? Where code is the most valuable unit because it's always on. And so now we've incentivized that and also given the world these tools to create too much of it. Right. And what can we actually do about that?
I mean, it's so hard being a platform. Like I don't envy GitHub's position in any way at all. I mean, I think that the earliest example of this that was, it had good intentions, but ended up being like a terrible burden was Hacktoberfest, right? Like I know all the people contributing were always excited, get a free shirt or whatever that year's thing was. And I remember like I said, I was living in SF at the time too, and I was working on open source, and I was friends with all these open source people, and going into it was like September, and everyone would be like, "Oh my God, it's coming!" And like, how do we like this terrible thing is coming? And I think we've gone past that, and everyone's kind of learned their lesson, and GitHub even shipped a lot of like opt-outs and all sorts of stuff for that. But that's exactly like the same thing. We're in a moment where AI companies are doing their own thing. And there's a lot of cool stuff about that. There's also a lot of like, oh my God, like what have we unleashed on the world? And we're just in debt now, backtracking and like how you could possibly like wrangle this in.
Well, huge thanks for spending this hour with us, Mitchell. This was really insightful. I love this conversation. Andrea's in the chat saying we need a part 2, so we'll see. But
sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to change in like 6 months. Like, we'll like a 6 month retrospective on vouch vouch makes sense at all. Like, it's a realistic question.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us with Open Source Friday. Thanks for letting me and Helen co-host, Andrea. And we'll see you all. You'll be back to your regular host next week. Thanks all.
Thanks everyone.